Welcome back to the second part of the digestive system lecture. What we want to do in this part is talk about the pancreas, the liver, then we'll go into the small intestine, the large intestine, and kind of wrap everything up. So the pancreas is an accessory organ to digestion, and it secretes pancreatic juices into the first portion of the small intestine called the duodenum. Now remember, duodenum and duodenum, these are terms you can use for this. Different textbooks use different pronunciations of it, so I guess pick which one you like the best and stick with that one. So the juices that the pancreas produces include pancreatic amylase. Pancreatic amylase is going to be a very powerful enzyme that will help you to digest starch and glycogen, and it will digest those into disaccharides. Pancreatic lipase is going to digest fatty acids into, it's going to digest fatty acids or fats into fatty acids and glycerol. Nucleases are going to digest nucleic acids into nucleotides. And then there is a whole host of proteases that are going to be secreted in an inactive form, and they won't become activated until they reach the small intestine. So some of the names of the inactive forms of enzymes include trypsinogen, chymotrypsinogen, and procarboxypeptidase. And you can probably imagine why these things are secreted in an inactive form. You wouldn't want these things to, digest your own body, or digest your pancreas. So they're made in an inactive form, and then once they get to the site where they're needed to digest food, they become activated. It's just showing a little bit of the anatomy of the pancreas. You can see the pancreas is tucked in underneath the stomach, and some people call it a feather-shaped or feather-like organ. I don't know if it looks like a feather to me, but that's what some people say. And there are, several ducts. You have a pancreatic duct right here, which is a tube that's going to basically get from all the exocrine glands making these digestive enzymes. It's going to collect all of those secretions, and they're going to be brought down to the small intestine. So there are accessory ducts, and then you have a hepatopancreatic duct that's going to join with the common bile duct to dump in bile and pancreatic juices to the small intestine. I wanted to back up here. Another thing the pancreas secretes is bicarbonate. That's something that you definitely want to write in. So bicarbonate, and that bicarbonate is of course a base, and it's going to be a fluid that helps neutralize acid coming from the stomach. So I apologize for forgetting that, but that's something that's important that the pancreas does secrete into the small intestine. This is just a gross structure of what that looks like if you looked at it on a cadaver. So remember, this pancreas is a really important organ, making many of those digestive enzymes and that base. Also remember, the pancreas is part of the endocrine system, making insulin and glucagon. So when the pancreas goes away, we usually don't live too long without a pancreatic transplant. So here's some of those enzymes. So trypsinogen is going to be activated. There are membrane-bound proteins in the small intestine. They're called enteropeptidases, and those things are going to be activated, and they're going to take trypsinogen and make it into the active form called trypsin. Trypsin also, once activated, can go and also activate trypsinogen to become trypsin as well. So procarboxypeptidase becomes carboxypeptidase, and then chymotrypsinogen becomes chymotrypsin. So the pancreas does make several different kinds of enzymes. One of the enzymes is an endopeptidase, and these are enzymes that digest the interior peptide bonds in a peptide molecule. So if you looked at if you looked at a protein being a sequence of amino acids, there are going to be exterior bonds. These are going to be like more of the exterior bonds here, and then there are these interior bonds. These interior bonds are where the endopeptidases, such as trypsin and chymotrypsin, will have their activity. So the exopeptidases are enzymes which digest a protein at the carboxyl and the amino ends of a polypeptide. So you have aminopeptidases and carboxypeptidases, and these digest again from the ends as opposed to the interior. Now, the endopeptidases work from the inside out, the exopeptidases work from the outside in, and between the action of two of these, you get a completely digested protein into individual amino acids. So secretion of pancreatic juices is controlled by both the nervous system and the endocrine systems. So we have parasympathetic nerves that are going to stimulate the secretion of pancreatic juice. And secretin is a hormone made by the first portion of the small intestine, and it stimulates the secretion of pancreatic juice as well. So acid in the duodenum is going to stimulate its secretion. So you have acid coming from the stomach. That's going to be a signal to certain cells to secrete secretin into the bloodstream, and that will go to the that'll go to the pancreas and activate it to send pancreatic juice to the small intestine. We have another hormone called cholecystokinin. This is a hormone also made by the duodenum, and its release is stimulated by the presence of proteins and fats in the duodenum. So this causes the pancreas to release pancreatic juice. Additionally, you have the sympathetic nervous system that will decrease the secretion of pancreatic juice. Okay, so no reason to digest food if you're about to be killed by a pack of wild animals. All right, moving on to another accessory organ, we're going to move over to the liver. Liver, super complex and interesting, very important and vital part to many different systems of the body, including the digestive system. So structurally, it's divided into two parts. It's a smaller left lobe and a larger right lobe. It's highly vascular. It has lots of little vascular channels, little capillaries that are sinusoid style capillaries, and these are little vascular channels, and we'll see those in just a second. So the nutrients absorbed from the small intestine are going to enter a circulation called the hepatic portal vein. So all the nutrients that you digest, all the fluids, all the blood that's draining from your small intestines are going to all enter into this hepatic portal vein, and they first go to the liver. Okay, so if you ever see a person or know of a person that's taking a lot of pills to try to commit suicide, all those pills will basically go to the liver. The liver will process much of that medication, but it might be overwhelmed if too many pills are taken. Also, if you eat poisonous mushrooms, the poisonous mushrooms, the ones that have digestive enzymes in them, will digest the liver. So any kind of poison that you ingest is going to go through that hepatic portal vein and go to the liver for detoxification. And so the liver is definitely a protective organ to protect us from things that we can ingest from the environment. So something else the liver does is it produces bile. Bile is a substance composed of bile salts, which are detergents to help break fats down, and it's also made of pigments from the breakdown of red blood cells. And I'll just show you what that looks like. Let me go forward just a little bit. So if you remember that red blood cells are destroyed by the liver, the globulin part, the protein part of hemoglobin is digested. The heme portion, the iron's recycled, but the other portion of heme is converted to biliverdin and then bilirubin, and then it's made into bile to be secreted. Excuse me, cell phone went off, my apologies. Let me go back here. So this is just the structure of a liver. You can see the left lobe and the right lobe. We have a larger right lobe, and separating the two lobes is that falciform ligament that helps to connect it in and hold the liver in place. Tucked in underneath is that little gallbladder that stores the bile that the liver is going to make. Just kind of flipping the liver over, you can see the smaller left lobe, the larger right lobe. There's that gallbladder tucked in, and there is circulation. There is duct work so that you can make bile, send it over to the gallbladder to be stored, and then you can send it to the small intestine to get rid of the bile or to help digest fats. So this is just basically showing the circulation. I wanted to make a point of the hepatic portal vein. You can see the hepatic portal vein right here. carries all the blood. So it carries all the blood from the small intestines to the liver to basically undergo digestion and to help store products and to also cleanse the blood from any kind of molecules that might have come in. So once the blood is cleaned, it's going to exit out through the hepatic vein, enter into the vena cava, and then travel on over to the heart. We do get the hepatic artery bringing fresh blood into the liver to basically take and oxygenate the cells of the liver. And I'll show you how that circulation works in just one second. All right, so here's the functional unit of the liver. So if you take a chunk of liver and look at it under a microscope, it's going to be made into these little hepatic lobules. And I guess they have a hexagonal shape appearance to them. In the center of the lobule will be the central vein. So that's where all the circulation coming into this unit will eventually exit out of the liver, as I'll show you in a second. So coming into the hepatic lobule are branches of the hepatic artery, branches of the hepatic portal vein, and you also have the bile duct, which will carry bile out of this lobule and eventually take it to the gallbladder. So there are hepatocytes that line all the sinusoids, and there are many sinusoids that are in there, which are little vascular channels that the blood can run into. Okay, so let's look at it a little bit more magnified. So you have here branches of the hepatic portal vein. These branches are coming into the sinusoid, as you can see with my white arrow that I'm creating there. We have branches of the hepatic artery, which is bringing fresh oxygenated blood, and it'll mix with the venous blood. But you want fresh oxygenated blood to come in to make sure it has plenty of oxygen to give these hepatocytes, which are very metabolically active cells. This is a hepatocyte right here and here, so you can see that they're arranged there. On the opposite side, you have basically the bile canal, which is going to take any of the breakdown products from blood. It's going to put it into the bile canal and take it out to the common bile duct and eventually take it over to the gallbladder for storage. Let me ink this out. So there are Kupffer cells, which are macrophages inside of the liver, inside these sinusoids, that will help to digest broken down red blood cells. So as the blood comes in, there are things that are going to be taken out of it. Waste products will be taken out of it. Drugs will be detoxified. Nutrients will be stored. Some nutrients will be stored in these hepatocytes. So these are basically filters of the blood. Once the blood has been nice and cleansed, it's going to enter into that central canal, and then it'll flow out of the liver. And I'll show you the circulation that it takes right now. So coming into the liver, into the sinusoids, there will be oxygenated blood from branches of the hepatic artery. There will be nutrient-rich but deoxygenated blood coming from the hepatic portal vein. These will enter into the hepatic sinusoids. The hepatocytes will do their job of cleansing and detoxifying the blood. It'll then enter the central vein. It'll enter into the hepatic vein, exit the liver, and enter into the inferior vena cava, and eventually go to the right atrium of the heart. So the liver stores carbohydrates. One of the carbohydrates it stores is called glycogen. It takes glucose molecules and stores them in the form of glycogen. When stimulated by glucagon, glycogen will be broken down into glucose, and those glucose molecules will be put into bloodstream. The liver also stores iron, and it stores vitamin A, and it also stores vitamin D. So lots of heavy, important vitamins, A and D, and then iron, of course, is important in red cell blood production. So very critical for that particular reason. We just talked about the red blood cells being broken down, and bile is going to be made and secreted by the gallbladder. Bile is going to be made by the liver, but stored and secreted by the gallbladder. And that takes us to the gallbladder. So the job of the gallbladder is to store and release bile into the small intestine. It does it via the cystic duct. So the duct is just a pipe work that the gallbladder uses to take this stuff down to the small intestine. Bile is made by the liver, and it's composed of water mainly, but there also are bile salts in there which are used as kind of like detergents. They emulsify or break fats down into smaller little globules. There's also those breakdown products of red blood cells, the bile pigments, there's cholesterol in it, and electrolytes as well. The gallbladder is stimulated to release bile by the hormone called cholecystokinin. If you remember, that's made and secreted by the duodenum of the first portion of the small intestine. So just showing you the right hepatic duct, the left hepatic duct. This basically goes down to the common hepatic duct. This ductwork can go directly straight down into the duodenum, but there are little branches of it that go to the cystic duct which carries the bile to the gallbladder. The cystic duct will also carry the bile from the gallbladder to the common hepatic duct. They will then form the common bile duct. This will join with the pancreas, with the pancreatic duct, and eventually drop all those products into the duodenum. There are sphincter muscles there that control the secretion of those particular products into the duodenum. And just showing you here the common bile duct coming down and joining with the pancreatic duct to form the hepatopancreatic ampulla. This eventually drops the materials down into the duodenum. Notice there are muscles there, sphincter muscles here and here, which can pinch that off and prevent those products from entering into the duodenum, or vice versa, things entering back in from the duodenum in. So here we have, stuff came into the esophagus. It's been digested by the stomach. It's been processed by the stomach. It goes into the duodenum. As it passes by, all the products from the pancreas and the gallbladder will be dumped onto those materials. Remember, pancreatic juice has all the digestive enzymes in the bicarbonate, which neutralizes acid coming from the stomach. The gallbladder has the bile detergents, the bile salts, which will help to emulsify or break down fats. So we're having a breakdown of fats, proteins, sugars, nucleic acids. There's lipases dumped on there, all to help digest the food in the duodenum. All right, moving on to the small intestine. The small intestine will complete the digestion of chyme, which came from the stomach, and it will absorb nutrients and put those into the bloodstream or into the lymphatic vessels, and then it sends leftover waste to the large intestine. There are three portions to the small intestine. We have the duodenum, we have the jejunum, and we have the ileum. The inner lining of the duodenum and the first portion or proximal portion of the jejunum are composed of finger-like projections called intestinal villi. And these help to increase the surface area of the intestine to increase the ability of it to absorb food or to come in contact with food. So I'll show you the villi in 1 second. Let me just show you the portions of the small intestine. So here we have the duodenum. We have kind of in the middle of the jejunum, and then at the end we have the ileum. The ileum will eventually join with the first portion of the large intestine called the cecum. So let's take a look at, I keep on writing ink over my face. Let me grab this. Okay, so let's take a look at the very interesting adaptations that the small intestine has to increase its surface area. So we have finger-like projections called villi. You can see the villi here and here and here. And basically it's almost like carpet. You can fold that carpet around and it sticks into the lumen of the cavity, and food will brush by it. All those little parts help to slow food down, and food brushes by it. If you look at the villi are made of these intestinal cells. They're essentially a columnar epithelium that have microvilli on the surface. Okay, so the structure of the villus is that it has blood capillaries inside the middle of the little finger-like projection, lots of epithelial cells on the surface in all three dimensions, And it also has extensions of the lymphatics called lacteals. This little yellow structure in the middle is called a lacteal, and I'll show you what that does in just a minute. Having the immune system in your intestines is really important because there's a lot of bacteria that will be on the outside surface that might penetrate in. If we look at one intestinal cell, so over here we're looking at one epithelial cell, one columnar epithelial cell, it has microvilli, which also increases the surface area. So those folds of the cell membrane increase the surface area. These intestinal cells are really important too, are really highly adapted too. They have lots of mitochondria, making lots of ATP. There's lots of Golgi apparatus and rough endoplasmic reticulum, so they can make tremendous numbers of digestive enzymes that they'll actually put on the surface of the microvilli. That helps to finalize the digestion of materials. Notice that the small intestine has the 4-layer construction. It has a mucosa, submucosa, the muscle layer, and the serosal layer, just like all the other organs of the alimentary canal. There are some different kinds of cells that are on that microvilli. Of course, we have the majority of the cells are going to be absorptive cells that are going to be the simple columnar cells that have microvilli. We have goblet cells that do secrete mucus to help things flow through. We have enteroendocrine cells, which secrete the hormones secretin and cholecystokinin, and we talked about the jobs that they perform. And then there are Paneth cells that produce lysozyme, and these cells are also capable of phagocytosis, so they can eat up bacteria and other materials. So we have a wide variety of cells within that villi. The majority of them will be the absorptive cells with the microvilli. So cells making up the villi have many enzymes embedded in their cell membranes. They have peptidases, which split the proteins into individual amino acids. There are sucrases, maltases, and lactases, which finalize the breakdown of disaccharides into monosaccharides that you can absorb. There are lipases, which take and split fatty acids, fats into fatty acids and glycerol. So all those complete the digestion of nutrients that we bring into our body. Here is just a picture showing you the hepatic portal vein bringing all the digested nutrients from the small intestine. But the lacteal is pretty important as well. Not only does it have an immune system function, but the fluid inside of the lacteal is called lymph, and basically it will absorb from the surrounding areas. It'll absorb triglycerides and carry those into the lymphatic vessels, eventually dropping those off into venous circulation. So that's one way that we transport some of the triglycerides that we digest in the food that we make. Excuse me, in the food that we digest and absorb. This is a decent chart. It doesn't have everything, but it's a pretty decent chart. There's a couple things that you might want to fill in, but carbohydrate digestion does begin in the oral cavity because we produce salivary amylase. It then continues in the small intestine and along the microvilli of the small intestine. So protein digestion will occur or begin in the stomach, and it'll find its completion in the small intestine and the wall of the small intestine. Nucleic acids are going to be digested in the small intestine, and of course the microvilli will complete its digestion and bring and absorb those nutrients in. But fat digestion does begin, so we do have lingual lipase. So you may want to fill that in if you're having the notes there. So lingual lipase is made by the tongue. So we do have some fat digestion that begins in the oral cavity. There's also gastric lipase. And you might wonder why this chart doesn't have it. These are pretty recent enzymes that they discovered that these particular, the tongue and the stomach make. So that's why it's not in this particular chart. But gastric lipase does begin digestion. So digestion of fats does begin all along the way, and then it has its completion in the small intestine. Okay, and to wrap things up with the large intestine, it's composed of 4 portions. The first portion is called the cecum. It's a pouch-like structure at the beginning of the large intestine, and projecting from it is the appendix, the vermiform appendix. This in German means kind of like worm-like, because it does look like a little worm. The appendix is not necessarily a digestive organ in humans, but it's actually a lymphatic. It's a lymphatic system or part, and it's part of it. It helps in our immunity. So going from the cecum, we're going to go into the colon. The colon is made of the ascending colon, the transverse colon, and the descending colon, and the sigmoid portion, or sigmoid colon. Then we enter into the rectum, which is a storage place for waste products, and then the anal canal, and then we exit out through the anus. So kind of looking here, here's the small intestine, the ileum. There is an ileocecal valve that allows for the flow of things from the ileum into the cecum. That valve will shut off so you can keep things flowing in a one-way path. Here's the first portion, the cecum, and here's the vermiform appendix hanging off. So you can live without the appendix. It does have lymphatic. It is part of the lymphatic system, and it does have some immunity that it provides for humans. It can get infected and have to be cut out when you have an appendicitis. So if we move up, we have the ascending colon, we have the transverse colon, we have the descending colon, the sigmoid colon, because it kind of goes in this little sigmoid curve shape, the rectum, and then we have the anal canal and the anus. So at the end, we have the rectum, we have the anal canal, we do have sphincters. So the internal anal sphincter is an involuntary sphincter, and then we have the external anal sphincter, which is voluntary. So we can, once our nerves are developed enough, we can have a place and time in choosing that we can go to the bathroom and defecate. When we get down to the end, the epithelium does change to a stratified squamous to protect from the exiting waste products. So the large intestine does have several functions. It absorbs water. It absorbs some electrolytes like sodium and chloride and vitamins B and K. It houses many bacteria which help break down the remaining parts of food. Bacterial fermentation, though, does produce gases such as methane, hydrogen gas, and carbon dioxide. So that's something that does occur in the large intestine. It does store and remove indigestible wastes. And so those are some of the things the large intestine does. So if you don't go to the bathroom frequently enough, so much water will be absorbed from your waste products that you will have to get an enema. That's where they take a tube and add water into the large intestines. Enemas are good too. You can actually absorb water, and if you can't take an IV and you can't drink water, you could do an enema to get some water into your body. Sometimes we actually put medicines into the large intestine because the absorptive ability of the intestinal wall. All right, well, that concludes a little bit about the digestive system, and I will see you next time in our next lecture. So until then, I wish you a great night or a good morning or a great day, whatever time you're watching this video. So goodbye.